Well, I'll first tell you why you shouldn't listen to me, and you shouldn't listen to me because I'm a fast failure, and I talk about that a lot. Cameron, who's here from our office, former Wall Street guy, he can echo that. We're fast failures in my office because we like to find the failure first and quickly so that we can move on to the successes. So maybe don't listen to that side. The things that we do, I run a family office called Clark Capital, original name, I know. We invest in companies that are doing $1 to $5 million of earnings, so EBITDA positive, great track record, solid management, located in the Western United States with people that we happen to like doing business with. We also have a division of our firm where we focus on early stage technologies coming out of technology transfer offices. And part of that strategy, we then dovetail in sort of an opportunity that's emerged in the last 2.5, 3 years since we've established, is a relationship that we have with the largest retailer in the world, where we can then insert our products and leverage our relationships there. So we're not just, everybody likes to say that they're smart money, right? But we happen to think that our money is probably as green as anybody else's as we invest. But we add value, and so our CFO will generally act as CFO in an early stage company for them, or our general counsel, or our IP attorney that works for us full time. So we're a small group, about 12 of us. We've allocated over the last 2+ years about $50 million of capital. It's all family office money from us, from other businesses that we've built. We continue to allocate, and we'll do something similar to that, about half of that number this year. So we look for opportunities, and we love entrepreneurs and working with them.
All right. So I'm Mike Dutton. I'm a partner at Dolphin Capital Group, and we are what we describe ourselves as kind of lower middle market growth equity investors. And so what does that mean? We like to invest in businesses that have a proven business model that is ready to scale. And so typically our companies are also cash flow positive, but not always. They generally have some size to them. So but we've done everything from small deals of startups to companies that have over 100 million in revenue. But a kind of typical deal for us would be a company between $1 and $10 million of EBITDA. Some of the companies that are around here that people would know about would be Ragnar Relay, which was a company we funded. It was 2 students at BYU. One of them was about to graduate and had a job offer from Ernst & Young and said, I'd really like to go pursue my passion and not go do this job, but go start my company. And so, we funded him, and they've done a great job. We've had actually 2 other business plans that we funded that have come out of universities. Another one, harvesting brine shrimp out of the Great Salt Lake. And another one, a property management firm that we just sold. It was a business plan competition. A guy wrote a plan to have a company to manage the second homes of people, expanded that into a couple of markets, and we just sold that company about 2 months ago. We also own Winder Farms, a couple of candy companies, Manduka, which is a yoga mat company. So that's, we like consumer goods companies. And our shtick is as well, I've got 4 partners, and all of us have been entrepreneurs before we've been investors, and we like to be highly involved in our portfolio.
So just by a raise of hands, how many of you have run a Ragnar? Are you kidding me?
Really? Okay, how many have run a color run?
Wow.
No, I wish I had. Is that right?
So I have a word to say to you people. Let's get running.
Craig, I know you're the moderator, and I know that you're in charge, but can we hear about you two, please? If you don't hear about Craig, you're missing out.
I'll let you hear about me, but I was going to tell you a story. So, because what you were saying there just reminded me of a story that you'll like. I'm a CS grad here from BYU, and I had a life insurance software company for 25 years. I sold a piece of my company about 18 years into it. I sold a minority interest to GE Capital, which was part of the biggest company in the world, GE at the time. They're still right there, depending on the the fortunes of Microsoft and Cisco and others, that they jump up and down, but who's the highest capitalization company in the world. Anyway, they came in to take a look at my company, and they make me an offer, and we do the deal. So I am now partially owned by GE, and I'm really quite impressed by myself because I have that happened. So part of the deal is I get a GE board member. We have our first board meeting, and I'm kind of, talking about things, and he goes, you really shouldn't be that impressed that we did this deal with you. I need you to understand that GE has $6 billion of free cash flow that they have to deploy each year. So you solve a problem for us. The reason I tell you that story is because these guys maybe don't have $6 billion, but they do have money that they need to deploy, and you can solve a problem for them by finding them a good place to deploy their money. And that's the purpose of this workshop, is to talk about how you would, in a sense, qualify, or how you would prepare yourself to take the funding that's available, right?
That's great.
So there you go. So let's talk about the current state of the art or current state of affairs in funding, both from startup, and you talked about or sort of beginning revenue stages. What should these people here be thinking about as far as preparing a company in order to ask for funding? And then where do you get interested? So go ahead and start.
Okay. Thank you.
So my advice to you is, before you come to somebody like us, prove your model out a bit. The longer that you can bootstrap your concept, the more you're going to own of your company at the end of the day. And so, I was thinking about how many plans do I see in a year, and how many of those get funded? And I probably, between my partners and I, we probably see, in some way or form, maybe 5 to 10 ideas a week. And then one of those will intrigue us enough that we'll start, we'll look at it. And then, so in a month, we might, seriously, semi-seriously look at 4 deals. And then we're going to fund about a deal a quarter. And so, we're a little bit halfway through the year. We've done 3 financings this year. So, kind of on track for 1 deal a quarter. And so, the ones that are going to get our attention are those that have some track record, not just, a business plan, not even, not a business plan on a back of a napkin, but somebody who's gone out there, developed a product, bootstrapped it, has some revenue, has some proof of concept. At least for us, there might be earlier stage investors out there, but go out there and bootstrap it for as long as you can, and then come to more, I guess more institutional money would be my advice. Also think about, the other thing I'd say is, I get a lot of, I used to teach a class here, and when I was doing that, I was getting business plans all the time from students. And, they haven't really thought through their valuation expectations. And so when you come and you sit down with a group like ours, really think about what you're asking for. When you're asking for, $500,000 and you want to give up 10% of your company, do you really think at that point your idea is worth $5 million? And you got to really think about, what am I willing to give an investor for their capital, and what does that imply about my valuation, and be really willing to defend that is probably my other piece of advice.
I think that's really sound. And for us, as we look at opportunities and see deals, and our deal flow is probably pretty similar to what Mike is describing, the question we ask ourselves internally, and this is why we hired much smarter people than I to look at these deals, where we can say, okay, this has some asymmetry or differentiation, or this is very disruptive. I mean, our CFO comes from Clayton Christensen's office and looks at everything with this disruptive innovation set of eyes. Is this disruptive? So that's one question. The other is, we ask ourselves, why would we not do this deal? We have to be so compelled to do this deal that it's just simple. It's easy. When you're talking about looking at hundreds of deals on an annual basis, you have to be able to say to yourself, well, gosh, there are no good reasons other than, X risk or whatever is typical to any deal as to why we would not do this. It's that simple moving forward. And listen, if we can add value, all the better. So with that and just those 2 comments, I would love to, and maybe I'm breaking rank here, Craig, if you'll forgive me, I would love to know what questions specifically related to that there might be amongst the group here. As you're starting businesses, as you're thinking about your own business, as you're in school, you have a great luxury to ask these two gentlemen, and I would plead with Craig to answer the questions also. There's some other people, Travis is in the back, that are from our team, and listen, we don't have enough interaction. We get, interaction a few times a week, but if you've got questions even that you'd like answered, it'd be helpful for us, so please.
My question would be, you talk about doing it, bootstrapping for a certain amount of time, right? So once this is growing and scalable, do you say before we look to that additional funding, and when we're doing it until we can't bootstrap anymore, or doing it until you just need the capital, or when would you say that breaking point is to start digging into that additional funding?
It's a great question. Do you want to answer that, as that was your point?
Sure.
And then I'd like to comment. If I could.
So I would bootstrap it as long as you can until you believe that the concept works. And then I just went to the pitch company. Well, they had this morning they had entrepreneurs from the school pitch their startups, and I saw a lot of them trying to raise $100,000 or $150,000 or $200,000. And I'm thinking, well, you're better off, in my opinion, you're better off scraping that together somehow, and then go out and raise $2 to $5 million. If you've only got to raise $50,000, get out your credit cards. Go ask your rich uncle. Get to the point where you can get it, where you are confident enough that you're ready to go out and raise a bigger chunk of money. Because whether you're raising $200,000 or $2 million, the amount of time that it takes, I think, is equal. And so I would do it to the point where you need to raise a serious chunk of capital. My 2 cents.
And if I may say also, I was in a position as an entrepreneur and as an operator growing a business, and I, just by way of background, was in tech, and we grew a company that came out of my then fiance's basement, and she was the person who funded it. It's like, okay, you're taking a bet on me in marriage, take a bet on me financially. I had to buy my way out of my former business, and she did. And so we bootstrapped there, and we then had proof of concept, and then we had earnings, and then could we have grown the business faster had we taken on some growth equity? And I would submit to you that yes, we could have. Could that have been, instead of being a 9-figure deal, could that have been a 10-figure exit for us? Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's hard to say, but listen, for me, all of this is bigger pie, right? You prove that, you're not going to have to give away everything, but just remember that bigger pie theory. Prove it, and you'll be much better off that way.
So I'm guessing that there aren't too many of you who can quite imagine asking for $2 to $5 million just now. Is there anybody in here that's ready to make that ask? So let's dial this down just a little bit. How do they get from student at BYU? Let's bridge it to get between here and the ask for $2 to $5 million. Let's see if we can help them through the credit card stage.
So my first business that I started, required $500,000 of capital, and for me, and I did that on $5,000 of credit card and $495,000 of vendor financing. And so meaning that I was this was an events company, and so my biggest expense was going to hotels and marketing firms. To get them to provide me services to put on events. Well, what I would do is I'd say, well, I don't have capital to pay you today. And so I would say, well, I will pay you 30 days after my event. And so I'd have all my, my marketing costs and my event costs hit me after I had already done the event. So I could collect the cash that way.
What is that cartoon character that says, I will gladly pay you someday
Wimpy from
for a hamburger?
Popeye.
Yeah.
That was your line.
That's right. Well, and then if you think about like a Ragnar, Ragnar sells out some of their events a year in advance. So they have all that capital that they can use to invest and grow their other races because they thought creatively about the cash flow. So I don't know if that solution doesn't work for everybody. That solution works for companies that are that might be inventory intensive or those kinds of things. But find a way to put that risk on your vendors or Or, through BYU, how do you get somebody, through the BYU networks to be an angel investor, to give you maybe that $50,000 to get started, but don't go out on a real capital raise until you're raising real capital.
You will eventually sort through them, and you'll hit upon one, which is the one that would work as a business, and that's where you start. Now, you still probably won't have the $50,000 or whatever small amount of capital it is that you need to start. Hopefully you would have saved it, but let's say you didn't. The third step in my grand plan is that you identify a strategic partner, which would be basically it's a client, somebody who would buy these services from you eventually when you're ready to sell them. And you go to them, they want the solution that you're offering. You need their money, you work a deal. You're going to give it to them free for a year, you're going to give it to them at a big discount. Whatever it takes to get the upfront money that you need from them, you work that deal out, and you build your business on their money. Now, why is that my grand recipe? Because that's exactly what I did to start my life insurance software business. I actually tried to sell life insurance. As ridiculous as that sounds. You're looking at the world's worst life insurance salesman. I am it. I tried to sell for 9 months and was fortunate enough to have had a computer science degree to lean on and an agency manager who thought it was a good idea to get some computer work in the agency that I was in. So he bought a computer. I provided a little bit of brain capital, and we built some solutions that they needed, which then I could start selling, and we launched a business. But I bootstrapped the whole thing. Why? Because I found somebody who needed a solution to a problem more than I needed, actually. They were willing to pay for it, and I just had the skills to provide it. So you can do exactly the same thing. It sounds harder than it actually is. If you get out there in the real world and identify a problem, I promise there's a way to cobble together the money to get the solution. Yeah. Agree with that?
Absolutely. So let me give you a practical example of something that came through our office this week. And this is something that we looked at simply because this came through a friend, someone who I had gone to high school with. I grew up in southern Idaho, and he is a prosthetics engineer at a place where they snap on and build prosthetic legs, arms, other devices for you. So he's been doing this for the last 10, 12 years, works for some other operators. He has an opportunity to buy that business. So this is a venture for him. This is interesting, right? He knows the space. He's not a business person. So he comes to me and says, James, I have an opportunity to buy this out. It does $300,000 of EBITDA, so it's a nice little business for him. I mean, the guy makes probably about $150,000 a year. So he's looking at this saying, hey, if you net out my salary, add this back in, I'm the owner now, I'm making close to $500,000. That's all without growing the business, right? So that's pretty interesting to a guy like that, to suddenly triple your income. But they want 4 times on it, so they want $1.2 million. You can get SBA financing for 3/4 of that. So what does he have to come up with? What's his delta? He's got to come up with $300,000. How does the average guy come up with $300,000 after paying off his student debt, after paying for his kids in whatever lessons, his house, his everything that he's doing? The guy has probably $25,000 of liquidity that he can put into this. And so he comes to me and he says, how can you help me with this? And my answer is what, guys? What would you do? What would you say to somebody like this? Well, so I thought about it, and I thought, well, why don't I reach out to people that live in his geography? And I have some friends that live sort of in that area that could be potential investors. But guess what they want? They want their pound of flesh, and they want their percentage of X, and they want 2 or 3 points up front, and then they want, maybe 18 points on it, and a 3-year call, and all these things that make it very, very difficult and put him in a bad position. Meanwhile, he's also paying off this SBA note. So he's got, almost $1 million of debt. He's got, and then $300,000 of this sort of sub debt. How does a guy ever get ahead in a situation like that? If everybody wants their pound of flesh, and if you look at 18% times 3, so rule of 72, so you almost are paying, 60% more on top of that extra, that delta there. So, I mean, it's really expensive money for a guy like that. So what do you do when you get creative, a la what Craig is saying? Well, you go back to your operators, and this is what we said to him, is go back to those operators and say, I don't do a deal where there's not some sort of earnout. I mean, we've sold companies before. We sell companies all the time. And is there always some sort of provision or a clawback or an earnout provision? Invariably, there's something to that effect. So for them to carry paper of up to 20%, that's pretty interesting. So a guy like that who has $25,000 of liquidity to his name suddenly has the opportunity to do this. He doesn't have to pay the extra 60% on top of that delta. And it keeps these operators honest where he can buy himself out. So because of his need and his lack of capital, he gets really creative and he does the best deal for himself in the end anyhow. So that's being creative. That's utilizing this principle that Craig is talking about. It allows you to do. And keeps sellers honest. So just one thought of, and one example as we were talking about that came through the door this week.
Other questions?
If we're going through this credit card stage, and you're just bootstrapping it, then is the reason to get investor funding so you can eventually make an exit, or is that because then at that point, if you're bootstrapping it through the credit card stage, and you're finally getting it, and maybe you want to scale and sell out at the end, like I can understand how you get funding there, but is that the only reason?
I'll take that. First, most businesses don't get funding from guys like us. Guys like us might, fund less than 10% of the businesses that are ever started. Most businesses are bootstrapped, they turn profitable, and they never have to raise outside capital. And so I think that, so first keep that in mind. A lot of businesses don't need what we do. And where we like to invest is not so that the company can get liquidity at some point, but so that it can get to scale. Don't invest in the business, don't go raise capital unless you think that by raising that capital, you're going to exponentially increase your business. Capital from us is going to be expensive. Capital from firms like us generally comes with terms like a participating preferred security with a coupon on top of it, which means that I'm going to get paid first, and then I'm going to get paid a return, and then we're going to share everything after that pro rata. And so, that's complicated, and that's hard for entrepreneurs to hear because they're the ones with the great ideas, which is true. But oftentimes valuations are such that the only way that I can get confidence in doing a deal is I've got to put those kinds of terms on top of that. So it allows you to have more upside while I also have some downside protection. So you only want to come to a guy like me or any kind of institutional money if you think that your business can be a grand slam. If it's going to be a lifestyle business where you could pay where it's going to grow at 10 to 20% a year, you're going to pay yourself a nice salary, it's cash flowing from the beginning, never come seek funding from us. That's a great business and you should do that forever.
So my question is just to go on top of that one. So let's say that you have an idea, but you really want to get, sorry, I can't quite see your face. Let's say you want to get experience working with someone who's taking a business from nothing to something, and you're more looking to kind of shadow that person. So what if a different way to kind of compromise or negotiate is say, hey, instead of all these fees, what if I give you, a majority share, you 51%, and that way, not only is someone like yourselves running the company if you think it's a good enough idea, but then we get the experience and kind of ride along and learn how you did it to go do another one possibly. Is that something that ever happens?
Can we hire you?
Yeah, please. Can you? I'd take it. You know what my salary is where I am right now? It's this. So I'll take any job I can get, right? I learned something. I sat on the panel with Craig last year and learned something from him as it relates to equity. And can I just say this parenthetically, is you're talking about the mechanics and everybody's talking about, 51% and majority ownership. I mean, listen, we don't do control deals by in general. We just don't do control deals, so that we don't get caught up in those mechanics, or when you're talking about a fully participating preferred instrument. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to do every deal, right? But I just want you to bear in mind as an operator, in association with your question, really quick, something that I learned from Craig last year as we sat on this panel. When someone comes to you and you've got this employee, or you're dealing with whatever person in your organization, remind them that they might not actually want equity. Does this sound familiar? You're talking about that? And this is how you hang on to businesses. So when someone comes to you and says, I work really hard and I'm in your organization and I'm doing this and I deserve X%. You know, you do what Craig does, and you put your arm around them and you invite them in their office and you say, no, you don't want equity, you want X. And that's right, because you don't want the risk that's associated with that. You want more money, you want more upside for the hard work that you're doing, on and on and on and on. So back to your question, right? Help me, can I just understand one more tidbit of what that is? When you're saying, how do you gain access to someone like Mike or to Craig, is that what you're saying? What do you?
No, just more or less, would someone actually be interested in taking that sort of deal? Because maybe I'm looking for your expertise more so than your money, because I would assume, like, what if it doesn't take that much to make this?
Have you watched Shark Tank?
Yeah.
Do you see that everybody on Shark Tank wants Mark Cuban to come on and
Yeah.
one of those guys to come on and kind of run the company? And
Right.
what's their answer every single time?
No.
That's the change.
So, you know, our thought on that is that we'll give you 51% and you take control, and then you'll entice me to be interested in your business. I mean, it's sort of a binary question, right? 100% of nothing is still nothing, right? So it doesn't matter. If you can execute, and I believe, or Mike or Craig, you know, believe in you and what you're doing, you know, the mechanics of the deal, I think, in my estimation, are secondary. You know, you'll get to what the right deal is, the right valuation, and what we always say in our firm is, fair is a feeling. If it's fair to you, and you feel like you got a great deal, and we feel like we got a great deal, that's a fair deal, right? So fair is a feeling, but just remember that 100% of nothing is nothing. You've got to have something for anyone, you know, on this panel or anybody outside of it to be really excited about you and what you're doing.
And I'll just add a couple things to that. So one is, you can build an advisory board. You know, people who would advise you, and there's lots of people around BYU who love participating in that. You know, the Founders Group has a mentorship program, and probably each of us mentor a couple of companies, and that's fun, and we like doing that. Two, don't overrate experience. For me, what has worked more than experience has been bootstrapping, working hard, being creative. You know, there's a reason why some of the greatest companies in America were started by people right out of college. And so don't overrate the experience that you can get by working for somebody else. Also, at this point in your life, your downside risk is so limited. You know, you could sign personal guarantees on loans, and if you lose, what are they going to take your used couch? You know, so right now, so your downside risk is limited. And also, you always have an opportunity to reboot. So let's say you go out and you do something and you're an abysmal failure. Well, go back to graduate school. And so then the other idea is that there are companies.
Yeah, it looks good on your resume.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you have a great story to tell in an essay. The other thing is there are companies that, you know, if you want a great training experience, and I think great training experiences are very valuable. I don't think that they're necessary, but there are companies that will hire people through a management rotational program. So like Winder has one. You know, it's a 3-year program where every 4 months, you know, you're doing sales, and then you're doing marketing, and then you're doing finance, and then doing your operations, and you go through a series of rotations in the company where at the end, you know, you're a pretty well-rounded business person who can then, you know, go do their own thing because you've touched a little bit of everything. And there's companies who do that, you know, management rotational program, you know, lots of them do.
But so just to sum up the answer, I think it was a decent idea, and I'm sure it's not an uncommon idea that you say, I have an idea for a business, but I'm not a businessman, so I'm going to try to get an experienced businessman to jump on and help me out. The answer to that is always going to be no. we're gonna look back at you and say, no, 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 you are the businessman, and we're here to help fund you and give you some direction, but you are the execution master. You are the Zen of execution, and none of us want to. Well, I'll be careful, but I can tell you, I don't want to go back and execute again. Running a business is really hard. The day-to-day part of running a business, selling, taking care of your customers, it's fun for a long time, and then it gets to not be fun all of a sudden, and that's when you know it's time to move on. Mm-hmm. So we want you to have that experience, and we will help you through it. Other questions?
Can I ask a question, Craig?
Yes.
Who's thinking about starting a business right now? You want to talk to us? You've got people in front of you that'll listen right now. This is a captive audience. This guy screens everybody else, keeps him out of my office until it's to a certain point, right? So you've got captive audience. What questions would you like to ask us specifically about what you're doing?
I fully identify with trimming numbers you can project with, numbers validate you, numbers, especially pre-sales, do what you're doing. We are a tech company based in partnerships around the world. We're the definition of globalization. The world is looking abroad, we're going abroad, we're trying to put it all in one convenient place and have social media just totally light up everybody on there. So, that brings us to our programmer next to me. We're looking at doing funding to get the website fully launched, because that first encounter, we don't want that downwards kind of spiral. So we need money to solidify the website, which is moving at
Why did you say that again? What was the purpose to get the website finished?
to really have that first kind of encounter where they come to it and they don't write it off as another one of those, this is a LinkedIn wannabe, or that first impression is quite important. Rather than rolling it out, we need some great development and testing.
Let me just jump in with a quote. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with that? If you're not embarrassed, if you're not absolutely embarrassed by your first release, you've worked on it too long.
Yeah.
That's the essence of what he said. And I absolutely agree with that. And I understand, listen, perfect is the enemy of good enough. I understand what you're saying, but it's just a wrong idea. You need to get a really crappy version out there in front of your customers, because if you're solving a real problem, they will put up with it.
You've touched on a very important thought, and so the first question I have back for you, and then I want to finish my thought, is what do you do?
We place people abroad.
Place them in what?
In their field of choice.
So like an HR placement firm, or
Well,
just so we understand, I don't know if you're sending them in a spaceship. I don't know if you're sending them.
twofold, for instance. Sometimes we have individuals come to us and say, I'd like to work in the DR Congo.
Oh.
Or we have 5 individuals we've sent to Jordan. They're working in Jordan now. So those people pay us to bridge that gap, kind of like headhunting that fold. But also companies now, or NGOs, say, well, we really have this gap that we want to fill quickly, and we can, and that's a reoccurring charge for them.
Oh, I won't
Work with that.
monopolize all
Fail fast. There's a whole concept of failing fast, iterating, lots of releases. That's how companies are built today. Get out there with the 80% solution, get market feedback, change. You're not going to hit a grand slam on your first release. I just basically echo what Greg said.
Can I, and how we define that and how we restate that in our firm is cross the chasm, right? So you're on one side of the valley, there's a river in between, there's, a ledge on the other side. Cross the chasm, take the jump, take the leap. You're probably going to fall. You're probably going to fail. It's probably going to be a bad first release. Those are just the odds, right? If you nail it, congratulations. Right? You're far better than I am. But we've invested in companies, and this is in the early years of my investing. You think you're master of the universe because you've built a company, and you think everybody operates the same way you do. They're going to work, 12, 14-hour days, 6, 7, sometimes days a week, and they're going to execute the way that you execute. You invest in companies, you invest in operators, and some people are just tinkerers. Don't be a tinkerer. It has to be perfect, and we'll polish and buff the rocket ship, and you never get it off the launch pad, right? You guys get that? So don't be a tinkerer. Cross the chasm and go. I mean, I'll give you one example, a company called 1-800-Pharmacy. Great name, right? Great IP behind it. So this is coming to me 6, 7 years ago. Drugstore.com is the only competition in the space. They tinkered for 6 years. And guess who won that battle? Well, Drugstore was winning the battle. Amazon entered the space. They won the war. It's game over. There's one group that's going to do that, and it's Amazon, right? You've got Prime. You've got every product. You've got facilities. You've got execution. They won it. They had no chance because these guys had to have something perfect before they would launch. Don't tinker. Just launch. Cross the chasm.
And I know what you're going to say. I didn't mean perfect. I just wanted to look nice when they came in and they wouldn't be put off by their first experience. You can't even go there. You have to get out. You don't have any money, right? That was you said you needed to pay him to get the thing done. So nobody will fund you at this point. There is nothing that you can say to anybody that would get them to fund you at this point, with the one exception of you finding a strategic partner who needs that more than you need it. And they might, but nobody else. Nobody here and nobody that we know will give you money for that, an idea in that situation. So if that's the reality, you go figure out how to solve it a different way. And that might mean that he works for free and that you don't get the thing looking anywhere near as nice as you would like to make it look, but you figure out how to get something out there that's just good enough to start getting the first checks.
You had a question right in front, too.
Yes. So, I don't know much about business, but I want to know what sort of liabilities there are to your family and friends if you decide to get loans for a business. I know personal loans that they can go back to your family and those debts follow them, but I don't know if I start a business and I have a loan under there, does it matter like if I have it sole proprietor, LLC? What is the risk to people who are in my circle?
I would say that if you're in the early stages of a business and you're getting a loan, it doesn't matter if you're an LLC or a corporation, you're going to sign it as a personal guarantor on that note, so your assets are at risk. Now, once you get bigger, there's ways to try to separate that risk, but when you're signing a personal guarantee, and you will at this point, you've got to be willing that the bank can come in and take everything you own.
What do you want to do? I mean, so again, this is an example of a question to me that those are important questions, but a more fundamental question is what it is that you want to do, right? So these are the mechanics that people can help you with. What do you want to do?
Well, I want to be able to, actually I have a couple of business ideas, but one, I'll just throw one out there for example. I want to be able to open a refill store for cleaning and hygiene products. So cutting out the cost of the bottle or the repetitive use of buying the bottle and throwing it away, you can go and make your own, say, shampoo or get your own cleaning product. You can tamper it to whatever you like. You want it stronger, you want it weaker, you want it to smell good, you want it to just be normal.
Oh yeah, you have one of those Coke machines where it has a...
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. You can mix in the things you want for your personal hygiene. And I know you can do that because you don't have to worry about FDA. I know that there's a company over here that used to fill soda bottles, but the problem was people could bring in their dirty soda bottles and then they could say, oh, I got sick from the soda bottles, so now I'm mad at you, I'm going to sue. Well, there's not the same type of restrictions for hygiene and cleaning
It's
products.
also a decent idea.
Yeah. Go talk to Dean Kamen. He invented this machine, the freestyle Coke machine. And the Segway. He's in Boston. He's the right guy to talk to. Other questions? There were a lot of you that wanted to start businesses. I haven't heard from anybody on this side.
Yeah, well, one thing, I've just started 2 smaller companies, and the thing I found with them, like you were saying, is I don't really mind if things are going badly because you can correct. You're learning something when things are going badly.
Right.
But it's just when nothing's happening that it's frustrating. It's stuck. And you can do that yourself by not launching, and, you know, but how do you, I mean, especially companies that are funding stuff, I mean, how do you just get things happen? I mean, I don't know. Like,
So what I see most common
Yeah.
in kind of student, particularly in the student-run startups I've been involved with, is so much focus on navel gazing. How do we make our product better? How are we going to get our financial reports out? How do we pick an attorney? You know, what accounting package we're going to use? Yada, yada, yada. And it's all about getting customers. And so there's always more that you can do to get customers. So there should never be nothing going on. You should be on the phone, visiting, talking to, selling
sales
customers.
side.
Always be
Like
selling.
doing it, yeah.
Always be selling.
And you learn a lot from talking to them.
Absolutely. Most students do not think enough about selling. To me, the selling is the hardest part in business, is generating the revenue.
Couldn't agree more. And you know, so you might roll your eyes a little bit about these sales organizations that are primarily based here in Utah County, right? You know, that it's knocking on doors. You sold religion as a missionary. You come home and you sell an alarm system or whatever that is. I couldn't disagree more. I think that sales is you can major in marketing, you can major in finance, you can major in economics. Why can't you major in sales? It is one of those taken for granted skills that the best CEOs, that the best CFOs, the best general counsels, the best every organizational leader that I know can sell one way or another. And that's this, you know, it's one of those things that's just simply taken for granted. If you can't sell, you probably ought not be an entrepreneur.
So nothing's happening in the department not selling.
Oh no, stuff's happening.
Yeah.
There's times when it stalls, and I feel like I actually have to step in there, generally with other team members, and just say, well, we're going to go do it, and just do it with them for a while until they get over that fear or whatever that was holding them back.
So we have an organization that's grown to be a good-sized organization. They're in the pet medication, pet products business. You know, sell all over the United States and now getting into global territory. They, you know, went from zero to a good-sized number very, very quickly. Why? Because their CEO, despite having a great sales team, national sales team that have worked at blue chip, big firms selling, he's the best salesman. So when he goes in and Walmart says, we would like to sell, you know, you to do $40 million of pet food this next year, guess what he walks away with? He walks away with a $100 million order because he's the best salesman in the organization. And then the salespeople just come in and sort of, you know, track and it's incremental from there. But he is the best salesman, and that's what has created this great company very quickly.
Probably have time for one more question, or no more questions. We'll take one more.
Do you know of any books that we could read that help us out with sales?
Yeah, let's close up with our favorite business question.
Can we start from this side? Okay, I'll give mine. So I just finished a dissertation overseas that I was doing. I read and reread the book Black Swan, and I liked to look at what the unknown is, what the Black Swan event might be. Because I, by nature, I'm just this optimist, and I think everything's just going to turn out just fine. But for me, it was sort of this nice pivot in my mind to say, hey, not everything is always going to go right. When you're, you know, placing this kind of capital, you need to understand what some of the risks are and what the unknown might be. So it's fine.
Mine would be, I forget the title. I think it's Shackleton's Incredible Voyage. It's a journey. It's the story of Shackleton leading an expedition to the South Pole, and it's not sales specific, but it is just about sticking to it, leadership, getting people to do things that they don't want to do. For me, it's the best book on business. If you search Shackleton, you'll find it.
I can't remember the name of it either, but it is a great book. But if you really want to know how to run a business, get E-Myth. It's the cookbook, step by step, how to get started. Do everything it says to do in E-Myth, and your businesses will be a long ways down the road.
There's E-Myth Revisited.
I meant Revisit, I think, is the one that I didn't even know there was an original E-Myth. E-Myth 2.
Like mythology, or what is that? How's that spelled?
Yeah, myth like mythology. All right, thanks for being here. We enjoyed our time with you. We move on to the showcase, I think.